there we are. Hello, everyone. This is Trends with Benefits. This is our weekly Roundtable Tech podcast here at Digital Trends. So right now, we are broadcasting live on a number of different platforms, wherever you're finding us. We appreciate that. You can drop in the comments. I see a lot of people commenting on Facebook, and there's a lot to talk about today. So each week here with this podcast, we kind of take a specific topic, and then we discuss it. And today we're talking about what life is going to be like in the post-pandemic world. So what does that mean? Like we all have to go back to offices at some point, right? But how is that going to look? How's transportation going to look? How are concerts? Who wants to go back to a movie theater right now? All of that are part of what we're going to be discussing here today. But with the Roundtable podcast, we're all broadcasting live, of course, from separate locations. And we're going to get into this right now. So since you're watching live, you can drop in your comments, questions. If you're listening to the podcast, even better. That's great. We do have a podcast, so hit subscribe to that. But let's introduce our roundtable cast of characters here. I'm Greg Nibbler, and to my virtual right, it is
Adrian Warner, aka Hot Nozzle.
Hot Nozzle.
Hot Nozzle.
Kind of worked. It kind of worked that time. It was a little.
We're
choppy.
never gonna do it as good as we did that first time that we all did it in sync, despite the latency issues.
I know. Yeah. Well, either way, we tried, and it was Adrian's birthday yesterday. So happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Nozzle.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good things happen only once a year. No, wait, that sounds sad.
Does it? What counts anymore anyway in quarantine? I mean,
Who knows?
birthdays still count. It still happens. I think you can do more than one. All right.
Yeah.
So,
But maybe I don't have to turn older this time. That's fine, right?
that's it. It doesn't count. Yeah, I like that idea. So we got Adrian Hot Nozzle Warner, and then to her right, down on the end.
Hey, I'm Caleb Dennison, a.k.a. The Whiskey Mist, a.k.a. Chicken Bone, a.k.a. No-Mo Potato Salad.
Because last week you were eating the potato salad. Is this
Yep.
what we're referencing here?
Yeah, I actually still have said tub of potato salad. It's
But
not
it's empty.
yet, which is amazing. I don't know. I think I just forget that it's in the fridge. But I am starving and kind of wish I had that right now. But I don't. It's okay. We'll be fine.
If anybody wants to ship Caleb some potato salad here immediately, that would be great. We'll post his address here in the comments on Facebook for everybody to send.
That sounds like a great plan.
We've got Caleb, and then down on the other end, we have.
I am Drew Prindle, aka Professor Prindle. I normally do the history segments here on the show, but today we don't really have a lot of history to talk about. It's mostly focused on the future.
Well, and that's because we've never gone through this before. There is no real history for us, like going through this. And that's what we want to talk about today. Like, what is it? I mean, I don't know where everybody's at who's watching or listening to this show, but for most places, you're still in quarantine. I know some places have opened back up, but regardless, nothing, I think we can all agree that nothing's really going to be the same for a long, long time as it was pre all this, just because of the fact that everything's changed so quick. And that's what we want to talk about, is just try to guess what that's going to be like. Like at some point, you know, we all are here in Portland, Oregon. That's where all of us are at right now. We have a great office. It's a really nice office. I would love to go back to that office. But I don't know how that's going to look. I don't think anybody does once this thing is all done, how that's all going to work out. And that's part of what we wanted to talk about today. And Drew, I know you've done a bunch of research on this, or at least some speculation about offices and that side of things, about how it could look like.
Yeah, fully dug into it, and we've also we did a series a while back. You might remember about the future of work, which was hilarious. How all of those predictions that all those people made have just completely gone out the window now that all this has happened. But there were a couple nuggets of information that still hold true, and I actually reached out to a few of those people that we spoke to for that series just to kind of like take their temperature, see what they think about this whole situation, and
Literally.
yeah.
Sorry.
Good one. But no, really, they pretty much echoed what you just said. Things might sort of go back to normal, but for most people, normal isn't ever going to come back. It is completely evaporated, especially in terms of like the office, which is kind of the place where everybody spent the bulk of their time outside of their house.
Right, that pre-corona
if you worked in an
world that we all
office,
lived in.
yeah. So if you worked in an office, it's not going to come back. And if it does, it's going to look drastically different. So, obviously one of the big trends that was happening prior to all of this was like the open office plan, which, everybody, you either loved it or you hated it, but now it's kind of not going to be a safe thing, right? So a lot of people were saying there's going to like a mandatory return of cubicle style workspaces is likely to happen in the near future. just because we need some sort of like partition to stop people's breath and stuff from, especially if you're sitting really close to somebody. In addition to that, maybe just going back to normal singular offices, but obviously that's going to cost like money. You're going to have to like remodel to make that happen. So in the interim, probably cubicles. They're coming back. And that's also going to be paired with maybe not having a full office. Like not everybody's going to be coming in unless you absolutely have to. So they're just going to be emptier in general. Cafeterias are another thing that's going to need dividers, and they're going to need lots of disinfection. There's going to be hand sanitizer everywhere. There's also going to need to be redesigns for how bathrooms work. Like we're going to need mostly touchless sinks and hand dryers and stuff like that. And I'm going to touch on this in a second, but we might even need new toilets. And as a result of all of these like changes that are going to happen, a lot of people are predicting that offices are going to get cut by a lot of these companies because we're in the middle of an economic downturn that's likely going to continue for quite some time now. And as profits start to dry up and companies start looking to ways that they can cut costs, offices that aren't getting used are going to be on the top of that list. So expect to see, like, moving forward in these next few months, companies just outright saying, hey, screw it, just everybody work from home indefinitely. And we're actually already seeing that. About an hour before this podcast happened, Twitter, Jack Dorsey got on and he was like, everybody at Twitter, we're all working from home permanently. We're just going to commit to that right now. If you want to work in the office, we still have it for now, but it's not open. Might come back in the future, but you have permission to work remotely forever. And I think they're kind of leading the charge on that. I expect to see a lot more of it moving forward.
Drew, you're bumming me out right now. You're seriously bumming me out because, like, I mean, I enjoyed the office experience that we had,
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think going back to cubicles probably a good idea. But like, how it is for me. It's me and my buddy Nick and Greg. We have that little office that we've been in, and like, are we ever going to be allowed in there? You know what I mean? I just like that's blown up, and especially after spending all this time working from home, I am so ready to get back to that office life right about now.
Yeah, that's something I think we're all gonna miss. Is kind of like the camaraderie and stuff that you get from like in-person interaction. There's gonna need to be some sort of substitute for that because right now we don't really have it, man. We don't have the witty office banter that we used to have. It's all just in a Zoom meeting, and then that's the end of it. It's all business, no fun little asides, which is kind of a requirement for creativity, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Does anybody else feel like this all seems maybe a little bit drastic? I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous to say when we are currently vulnerable, right? So of course, while we're vulnerable, like it would be necessary to institute these things. But I would hope that, as was the case with many other previous pandemics, ultimately we end up protecting ourselves and are no longer vulnerable. And all this be that necessary? I mean, for companies, they can save a lot of money. If they trim down the amount of square footage that they have to lease somewhere, I mean, our office space, I'm sure, is very expensive being in, a Portland high rise and everything else. But so I understand the cost savings involved, right? But like, I don't know. It all seems like we're planning the rest of our future based on this sliver of time, whether it's a year and a half, 2 years. But then what happens when we're not walking around afraid that we're going to catch something all the time?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, thinking about it, like, how would we go back? Like, would we have to have like temperature checks, saying something is still, until there's a vaccine and everyone's vaccinated, which could be years. I mean, who knows, with something like that. Just assume that it's at least like a year and a half out before something like that happens.
And I feel like such a big piece of this is that we're going to have to change the way that airflow happens within buildings. It's like, you could talk about putting people in cubicles, you can talk about replacing toilets, or you can talk about, scaling back the amount of people that are physically in there. But like, if you have one infected person on one end of the office and that air travels back to the other people 6 feet away, it's not going to matter. So it's so uncertain. I know there's that epidemiologist blog that like kind of blew up over the past week or so, kind of detailing this, which I wish I had their exact name in front of me. But yeah, until that can be solved, until this vaccine can be, available, it's kind of like, well, shoot, what can you do other than like completely take out an air vent system and replace it?
Yeah,
You're
I'm
gonna do that
thinking
on
about that even with
planes as
with the
well?
building though too, with all the other offices in the building, and this is the same of every office building everywhere. You know, that air flowing in and out of offices on top of it. I mean,
I
yeah,
mean, we
that's
think about like how our allergies kick up every single time we're in the office in the morning and we're all like at 9 a.m.
yep,
Um,
yep.
so it goes to show that
It's a very
those
good
problems
point.
are there.
Well, and Drew, you were saying something about bathrooms too. So I know we need to talk about this.
So yeah, this is a weird one, man. One of the guys that I spoke to is an expert in fecal aerosolization. I just
I'm
love
sorry,
saying
that
that.
my
term, I'm
favorite word
perpetually
ever.
12, and that term is funny.
So the best way to describe this is like, I don't know if you guys watch Mythbusters, but there was this episode that they tried to debunk this myth that your toothbrush probably has poop particles on it. And the reason that your toothbrush probably has poop particles on it is when you flush a toilet, little microparticles of poop get kicked up into the air, and some of those don't just fall back down. Some of them actually evaporate, and they still have the little tiny bits of poop in them. And that just goes everywhere, and it settles on your toothbrush, on all the surfaces in the bathroom, all that stuff. And they actually proved that that is legitimate. That totally happens. And this guy is the the world's leading expert on this phenomenon, right? So he says it's extremely prevalent, and it's a consequence of the way that toilet flushing mechanisms work. So just how violent the water sloshes around, how it swirls, all of that stuff contributes to that. And because COVID-19 has been shown to shed and like spread through people's poop, it's not super common. It's mostly done through the lungs, but sometimes it does take up, residence in your intestines, and you shed it in your feces. And when that happens, you can absolutely spread it by pooping and flushing in a toilet. So we'll have to come up with ways to mitigate that in public restrooms, including office restrooms, which once again is going to be a massive like overhaul project that people aren't even thinking about right now. So there is a long road ahead of us and a lot of changes that we're going to have to make moving forward just to make sure that the places that we go are safe.
Wow.
Somehow,
Well, going home, that's all it is. But sorry, Adrian.
I was going to say, somehow I feel like Japan will fix this.
Oh, yeah. If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Toto. Toto already has this figured out. Interestingly, though, one of the things the guy said that helps mitigate this is just closing the lid before you flush. It doesn't completely stop it, but it does reduce the distance that all the poo particles travel and everything. So maybe the answer just in the interim is toilet lids that close themselves, which I believe Toto has already.
We would actually have to have lids on our toilets in order for that to work.
Yeah.
So invest in toilet lids right now. Maybe that's the advice.
Yeah, buy stocks in toilet lids right now. They're going to be huge in a few months.
Seeing some comments come through here just on Facebook. I wanted to address that. Ramona said ultraviolet light. And that is something, yeah, I've seen proposals about that where more ultraviolet light.
It's a pretty decent solution. The only problem is ultraviolet light only works on places that it reaches. So if there are any shadows anywhere, think about like the little rim under the toilet seat, any other surface that's not going to be struck by that light. It's completely ineffective. So I think a combination of UV light and then like liquid disinfection through like traditional sanitizers and stuff is going to be the way to go.
Man, and that's just one aspect. Well, going from that, again, we're just trying to like predict the post-pandemic world. That's the name of this. So we're guessing on some of this too, but that is the tech behind it. And talking about that, just how we get there and how we get anywhere with transportation, that's all stuff that's changing too. And Adrian, I know you've got some details on that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how all of these different cities, especially with public transportation, are tackling things. The airline industry is being hit really hard right now. I saw a statistic the other day that there's an average of 23 people within the US on commercial airlines on any given day, which is insane. Obviously a new low. So companies, cities, everybody, and worldwide, everybody has a lot to figure out in order to get people from point A to point B. Even if we're not going back to the office anytime soon, there's still essential workers out there. There's people who don't have cars that rely on public transportation, and presumably we'll want to go see our families at some point in time if they're in other cities. So yeah, the first one is just public transit. I know that here in Portland, our organization TriMet, they're doing like a thorough clean before the start of each day. Our system starts at 5:30 in the morning, but out in New York City, where trains run 24 hours a day, they're actually starting to enforce procedures where they're shutting down between 1 and 5 a.m. for cleaning of all of their subway lines, and doing a thorough cleaning of all stainless steel, plastic, other areas. So the MTA is actually tackling that, and that is, I mean, you just think about that and like what a huge undertaking that is, but it makes sense because there was a recent study that was published that said the virus could live up for 3 days on plastic and stainless steel. And then there was another one that said after 7 days could even be potentially, the virus could still be found on surfaces. So that's kind of a requirement that, at least 24 hours is the very least they could do to make things safer for people. You just have to hope that you don't sit in somebody's spot who has it before you.
Aren't that clean anyway? Like,
nope. Well, they're definitely seeing less riders right now. So,
God,
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just the fact too that they're shutting it down, like that's huge for New York, even if it is in the middle of 1 to 5 or whatever it is. Like that's still a big, huge undertaking.
That's a huge undertaking. And I mean, you think about how many cars they have, how many rail lines they have, and how far they go. It's just like kind of mind boggling to me. Like here we have, a couple rail lines, and, same in Boston, a couple rail lines, and they don't run all day. But like, yeah, 24-hour a day. I don't know how New York's going to tackle it, but, good luck.
Yeah, right.
Right. And anyways, but yeah, beyond that, beyond public transportation, there's obviously private companies out there, ride shares. So Uber and Lyft are also doing their own methods to tackle this. They're requiring all riders and drivers to wear face masks. Lyft is just requiring you to opt in and confirm that you're doing those proper safety precautions through the app when you're booking a trip. Uber is going one step further and saying that they're developing AI technology to figure out whether or not riders and drivers are wearing masks. So it's kind of getting around relying on drivers to do the policing for them. I've definitely heard anecdotes of people using Uber in town and saying that their driver didn't have a mask or that they weren't required to wear a mask. So I don't know when all of that technically goes into effect, if it already is or not. That's, kind of a terrifying idea that Uber would own some sort of technology that would be able to read your face,
right,
capture it, and tell whether or not you're wearing this.
Yeah, that's a whole other aspect too. When you think about the privacy issues with that, where it's scanning everybody's faces and like alerting that you're not wearing a mask. I mean, I don't know how much they've used of any kind of technology like that before, but that is a whole other aspect of just getting used to having ourselves being, facial recognition technology now for a whole different purpose. But that's going to be prevalent. I feel like a lot of places are. If Uber does it,
yeah,
probably you would think everybody else is going to do it too.
Yeah,
is that going to make you feel any safer is the question. Like, are you going to trust public transit or ride sharing anymore if they do these things? I don't know about you guys, but I don't plan on getting on a bus anytime soon.
Yeah. I've been riding my bike a lot of places. That's
the thing. I read a few articles about how like we could kind of use this time as an opportunity to expand bike paths, like make it easier for people to commute in non-enclosed spaces. And I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I know Portland's doing that. The transportation, the PBOT, I forget exactly, Bureau of Transportation, Portland Bureau of Transportation, words, are shutting down like greenways so that existing places where bikes are already encouraged to go, but they're shutting them down so people can actually avoid each other and use the street to get around, versus just having bikes and cars in the same space. So I'm curious to see how many more people use it. I think it's like depending on time of year, do people want to be outside? But going back to that, recognition technology, obviously we've heard about that kind of stuff being used over in China, but France is actually now implementing AI that's going to do something very similar, where on public transportation, they're going to see if people are wearing masks, because they actually have a law in place requiring people to wear masks on public transportation. they're the third hardest hit country in the European Union. So it's interesting to see them develop this. And apparently it's all GDPR compliant. The company who's making this, they're not uploading any information to the cloud. They're only using it in like 15-second loops to record data and just identify the numbers, like how many people are riding public transportation and how many people are wearing masks or not. The company was really interesting. Their quotes that they gave on all of this and how they're adhering to these privacy policies. That I can't pronounce it. Data Collab.
Sure.
But if they can do it, and they can do it in a way where they're proving they're not capturing people's information and selling it, that kind of provides some hope for just statistical information to be available on a more widespread basis.
Yeah, I mean it is important to know how many people are doing it. That's so weird though. Still, it's going to be a weird thing to get used to if that's implemented in a bunch of places. I mean, I guess that's just what we have to get used to though.
Right. Yeah, it's I'm like, how many cameras do we think are probably on most surfaces anyways? Or it's not surfaces, but just like, we're in front of our video cameras all day long. When we're outside, there's cameras on, street intersections and things like that. So how many of them are going to be outfitted with this stuff? That's getting a little conspiracy theory, but
right.
I don't know.
But understandable to a certain extent. I mean, yeah, it's just going to be interesting. I haven't taken an Uber or Lyft since this has all gone on, but I have talked to other people who did, and they said, yeah, they're wearing masks and gloves, but I don't know when I'm going to be comfortable doing that. I mean, that's part of the other thing. And looking at that, and I know there's so much to talk about with this, but talking about that, getting comfortable with things like going to the theater again, going to events again, or going to that kind of thing. I know that's a huge issue too when it comes to just how this has affected entertainment. And Caleb, I know you've got the details on that, like just what it's really affecting.
Well, I mean, I think one of the first things you have to look at are movie theaters, right? These are, name an enclosed space, and we could probably talk about how that enclosed space presents some kind of challenge to us, and how are we ever going to do it again? Personally speaking, the grocery store, I freaking hate it right now. Like there is very little enforcement happening at so many different, stores that are open right now. Most people not wearing masks, a lot of folks really not respecting their distance. And outside of having like a yardstick that you can poke people with, or preemptively keep them from, getting in your bubble, like there's not a lot you can do about that. And it's difficult. Movie theater though is one place that I think if you did it right, you might be able to at least mitigate some risks, because there are already like mechanisms that were moving us towards this. So if you look at the point of sale for the movie tickets themselves, increasingly digital. You use your phone to get in. You don't have to hand a ticket to somebody who's handled like countless hundreds of tickets before yours, who essentially rips it in half and hands it right back to you. That's a ridiculous transmission point possible there. Concessions, I'm not sure how the concessions look, but I imagine, probably similar to the fact that, you can still go to a restaurant and pick up food and take it home and eat it. You might still be able to do the concessions. They need to, because that's where they make a lot of their money. But then once you're actually in the theater, you got to think about the seating situation, right? And I don't see us going back to being huddled up, max capacity seating anymore. I think that they're going to have to, if they don't completely revamp what seating in theaters looks like, and they keep the existing seating, I think that we have to move to the assigned seating model and make sure that, nobody gets, you can still pick your seat, but your options are restricted based on the distance from other seats that are already taken. With the exception of, you're bringing your sweetheart with you, or somebody who is part of your household or what have you. So I think you could pull that off, keep people distanced a bit inside that enclosed space. Fortunately, they're fairly large volume. Like the floor plan may not be huge, but they're usually extremely high ceilings. and fairly elaborate ventilation systems going on there. So it's possible, I suppose. I don't know if people are going to want to subject themselves to it, though.
That's the other thing.
Along with everything else we've been talking about today, right? Do you really want to climb in that subway car, in that bus, in that Uber? A tightly enclosed space is much more nerve-wracking than a larger one. So we'll see how people take to it. But the other part of this is the movie theaters have gone on without operating long enough that the studios who have invested millions and millions and millions of dollars in producing movies that are in the can, ready to release, and they're ready to put them out there, and they need to make some money back, have taken to direct to streaming releasing. We saw that with Trolls 2, which landed Universal in a lot of hot water with the theater operators, but it went out and it did pretty well. So we're seeing more and more of that happening. Disney's talking about doing something similar. I think that it's just a matter of time until Warner does. Warner's part of HBO Max, and they would.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. Just today, they announced that Hamilton was moving from its theatrical release like next year to they're releasing it on Disney Plus. So just an example of another one.
Yeah, I mean, Disney Plus has this platform that they own 100%. And they have a lot of properties, and what better place to put it than on something they 100% own? They keep it there, and that's the only place you can go see it. It makes sense. And if Warner does something similar through HBO Max, that would be really interesting. You'd have 3 heavy hitters that were doing something similar. So it's going to put the movie studios at odds with the theater operators, and that's tough. But also, you've got like Amazon's looking at purchasing up AMC theaters, and not so that it can operate the theaters. The theory there is that they would actually sell them off, like get all of that property and then sell off the property and then kind of revamp the way that we, watch movies. And there's a lot of people saying, yes, but we value the theatrical experience, the thing that you can only get on a really massive screen with a big elaborate audio system and popcorn you have to pay way too much for. Yes, don't we all love that? Well, yeah, but people's home entertainment systems are getting better and better and better now. And I think that the notion that first run blockbuster releases could be sent straight to your home for a price. I don't think we're just going to get it as part of our Netflix subscription. I think that they'll build a model where we pay a little bit more to see these in our homes where we might normally go see them in a theater. But that could absolutely just completely crush the commercial theater experience, to the point where at least they'd have to build them like, small private rooms that you rent out. Like movies would be more like, private karaoke rooms where you and a bunch of friends you trust or whatever go in on this thing together and you kind of experience it together. So you can have that large group sort of experience, which I think is really important, especially for action and comedy flicks where you laugh together and are impressed together. But yeah, we could see it move in a number of different ways. I do think it's fair to say, though, that the way it's been done in the past is pretty much over. And then, of course, that makes me wonder about live music venues and live concerts and things of that nature, where, again, we're all seated very closely together, enclosed space, mass numbers. I hate it. I hate it.
I mean, I do too, but I think you're right. It's not going back to the same way it was before. Like concert festivals where there's 20,000 people all hot and sweaty bumping up against each other. I don't think that's going to happen for a while. Those things just can't. I mean, I just don't see how it would go on.
No crowd surfing for now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, that's the worst. Yeah. No crowd surfing. It'll be, just how this is all changing so quickly, I think is really interesting. I think that Amazon thing is definitely something to follow, though. Like if they're trying to buy AMC and then just sell them off, I mean, that would just crush that in a second. That's an interesting development when it comes down to it. And there's so many things too to follow along. I'm just realizing that we're out of time. We didn't even cover everything that we wanted to cover here on this episode. So we might have to do some more of them. I did want to show the one picture though. There was a group out of LA, an entertainment company, I think it's the one that's behind Skrillex's shows that put out these renderings of what could look like something you would wear if you were going to a concert. And there's these, it's these like Daft Punk like futuristic outfits with like masks and like a shield on your face that you could maybe wear out.
It's like Bubble Boy, but like astronaut style.
Yes,
I'm really okay with this.
Oh my god.
Well, I mean, if you did actual bubbles, like that could revolutionize the mosh pit, but also keep it alive too. You know what I mean? And I would argue that would be a lot more fun. You know, less actual injuries and more just bouncing around. There's nothing wrong with that.
This is still more like evidence that we need to transition the world to a Zorb based like everything.
I was gonna say that's really Drew and Adrian have had this platform for a little while about Zorbs and Daft Punk helmets. That it could be your time. I mean, Zorbs could be a good investment.
Really the only way to move forward. Clearly.
Yeah. Well, that's the determination of this podcast. We all need Zorbs for the office, for everything. So I'm on board with that. So I'm going to start investing now in that as well. Well,
and you could kind of hug people again. You could run towards them. Like, hi, buddy.
Okay.
No clue where you'll end up, but
we need to get these and film a video in a park of what this would look like. That's got to happen. All right. I want to say thank you to everybody who's tuning in. I know that we're out of time, but this is our show every week where we talk about things like this, and everything's changing so much that we're just trying to keep up to date with everything that's going on with the tech side of things too. And you can follow along at digitaltrends.com. Of course, we've got all those articles and those interviews that Drew was talking about with everything with that, with the offices and how they're going to look. And it's definitely interesting. We want to know what you think too. You can always send us an email, podcast@digitaltrends.com, and let us know what you think. Let us know what you're doing, because everybody's going to be trying out all kinds of different things right now. And we would like to be on top of that too. And I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching live. Hit subscribe to the audio version. That is a great way to follow along. And thanks for tuning in. Next time, maybe we'll all be in Zorbs. We'll talk to you next week with another episode.